Eat your heart out, Jack Morris. We've got a new Braves killer, and his name is Zebby Matthews. We'll talk about it on the Twinkie Town Tavern. Well, hello and welcome to the Twinkie Town Tavern, where the beer is always cold, the Twins talk is always hot, and the stools are always open. I'm your host, Josh Kolojeski, inviting you to grab a drink, pull up a chair, and let's talk about the Minnesota Twins winning their series against the Atlanta Braves. Here's how it happened. First inning runs for the third game in a row. You betcha. Ryan Jeffers goes oppo for a double off the wall before Josh Bell hits one to Tommy Land. That's a second deck, two-run shot into center field, and it gives Minnesota a 2-0 lead in the first. And that's all Zebby Matthews needed. Zebby has been inconsistent all year, but was in a groove on Tuesday, carving up one of the top lineups in baseball until finally giving up some damage in the sixth. That's when Drake Baldwin takes him deep. Michael Harris, the second, and Ozzie Albies then hit back-to-back singles before Cody Funderburk comes in to put out the fire. The book closed on Matthews. He allows just one run on 5 hits and one walk while striking out 4 in 5 2/3 innings. Meanwhile, the Twins bullpen does the job once again. It is becoming something that we're taking for granted at this point. Andrew Morris, AJ Minter, and Yoendris Gomez combined to give up just 1 hit and no walks in the final 3 innings of the game. Meanwhile, Ryan Jeffers adds a 2-run double in the bottom of the 8th for some insurance, but it was insurance that the Twins didn't end up needing, as Gomez closes the door for his 18th straight save as a member of the Minnesota Twins. Minnesota now in second place in the AL Central at 62-65. The Twins are just 4 games behind the White Sox for first place and a half game behind the Texas Rangers for the final AL wildcard spot. Let's get into it. Thank you for joining us here on the Twinkie Town Tavern. We are a part of the Grey Duck Sports Network. Follow us on Twitter and YouTube at Grey Duck Sports. And then we are on TikTok at grey.duck.sports. There you can find all of our podcasts on the Grey Duck Sports Network, as well as clips from our shows and different series of shorts that we are doing throughout the calendar year. Again, that is at Grey Duck Sports on both Twitter and YouTube, and at grey.duck.sports over on TikTok. Well, how about Zebby Matthews? The new Jack Morris, some people are saying. Maybe some people that are in a time machine and also a baseball distortion machine that really hurts the way that you watch the game. But Zebby Matthews today was a Jack Morris Braves killer. Now, he went only about half the length that Jack Morris did in that Game 7 of the 1991 World Series many years ago, and gave up a run, whereas Jack Morris tossed 10 shutout innings. But for today's purposes, he gets to wear the same sort of badge of honor in that he was a Braves killer in a time where the Twins really needed him to be a Braves killer. He comes through and, against one of the top lineups in baseball, is able to keep them silent. Let's remember what this Braves lineup was in 2023. That was a Braves lineup that tied the Minnesota Twins all-time home run record in one season as a team at 307. And they were also hitting the ball all over the place when it wasn't going out of the park. It was one of the best offenses that we have ever seen in Major League Baseball history, period. And a lot of players on that team are still on the 2026 version of the Atlanta Braves. Now, some to different skill levels than they were in 2023 for sure, but still, you've got Matt Olson, you've got Ronald Acuna Jr., you've got Ozzie Albies. Sean Murphy is not as good as he was in 2023, but Drake Baldwin at the catcher position has been better than Sean Murphy ever was in 2023. So you've got that added onto there. Michael Harris II is still there. They don't have Marcell Ozuna anymore, but they've got a nice platoon with Mike Yastrzemski going. So there are a ton of good hitting players on this team, and now we've seen 2 games in a row where we have needed shutdown starting pitching and then a shutdown bullpen against a top lineup in order to really keep ourselves into this season, and the pitchers for your Minnesota Twins have answered the call. Bailey Ober to a lesser extent on Monday, and then Zebby Matthews today. And sure, there was probably a little bit of luck involved for Matthews. It's not like he was getting a lot of swing and miss stuff. I think just 6 whiffs in 45 swings. That percentage isn't typically going to be indicative of a awesome type of game that we saw from Zebby Matthews. It could still be a quality start. It could still be a good game. It could be something that a pitcher that doesn't have as great of stuff is able to use, like Bartolo Colon back when he threw that complete game with the Twins in 2017. Didn't have great stuff, but didn't need to get swings and misses in order to get outs. But more often than not, that can be a pretty good indicator of how well your stuff is playing. And Zebby Matthews has above average major league stuff. We know this. It is just he hasn't been able to utilize it at any point in his major league career to generate as much swing and miss stuff that you would expect with a 97 mile per hour fastball and 4 other pitches that he throws at a 10+% rate outside of that. So he's mixing them all up. You'd think there'd be more swing and miss stuff, but that just hasn't been the case for Zebby Matthews. So he only gets the 6 whiffs today, and a lot of the contact that he was giving up was hard contact. He had 18, as Baseball Savant calls them, batted ball events, times where the ball is batted into fair territory. Of those 18, 7 of those were softly hit, 11 of those were hard hit, and he only gave up 5 hits total. One of those being a home run, and the next 2 only coming in once the home run had happened in the 6th inning. Up until that point, he had only given up 2 hits and 1 walk. And then finally, they're able to get something against him and get him out of the game. Otherwise, Zebby probably would have gone even deeper into this game. And yet, even with the limited swing and miss stuff, the bountiful harvest of hard contact that the Braves were able to get against him, Zebby, against all odds, stood through it all and was able to hold Atlanta to just 1 run in 5 2/3 innings. He stepped up and answered the call, and a mea culpa from my end to be issued to Zebby Matthews after I kind of berated him a little bit in last week's show. And last week's show, when it was his most recent start, talking about how he just has not been the pitcher that we've all expected, and he needs to cut down on some of the pitches. And it was part of a grander narrative of a failure since the All-Star break, to put it bluntly, of the Minnesota Twins rotation en masse. Zebby Matthews, for at least one night, has stemmed another rant, has kept another rant off of the table. And specifically, this mea culpa is directed at his slider, because I said, well, the slider and cutter don't really do all that much on a horizontal plane. You want your slider to get horizontal depth off of your fastball. And Zebby has a fastball that runs a little bit, so even though the slider horizontally is straight down from the release point, it still can look a little bit like a slider coming off of a fastball that runs. But I said, I don't think that slider is going to do you a whole lot of good. And the cutter was even worse. Go with the curveball, changeup, fastball. And to my, I guess not chagrin, maybe the prognosticator side of me's chagrin, but also just to my happiness, because he was able to be effective with it, the slider was the pitch that generated all of those swings and misses. The few and far between that they were generated because of the slider. So maybe I was being a bit too overbearing in that sense, and a bit too aggressive in telling him to cut a third of his repertoire off if he wanted to continue to be a starting pitcher. And I even basically called for his job. But if he can deliver this in a huge moment on a more consistent basis down the stretch, then that will play. I still have my doubts that this will be a regular occurrence the rest of the way, but if Zebby Matthews proves me wrong, I will be all for it. I will not be opposed to him throwing quality start after quality start the rest of the way and keeping the Twins into this playoff race. Because if he can do what he did tonight on a consistent basis, and that is working through a tough order despite being battered around the ballpark in terms of the hard hits that he was giving up, still working around all that to give up just one run, that is going to do wonders down the stretch. And again, another hats off to Derek Shelton, because for the second straight night, after 2 straight nights of not knowing when to pull his starting pitcher and pulling them way too late, Derek Shelton has learned it is better to be early than late when it comes to pulling your starting pitcher out of the game, especially now when you have this lights-out bullpen. I can understand it earlier in the year when you were very hesitant to go to many pitchers in your bullpen. You want the starter to extend the length. Maybe it was just Derek Shelton adjusting to a new reality. That is, now you have a bullpen that can get you out of jams, and that is a lot deeper than it was earlier in the season. But he pulls Zebby Matthews out at the exact right time. He gives up the home run, and then immediately after the home run gives up a long fly ball to right field. And then immediately after that, he gives up a sharp line drive that the Twins have to make a diving catch in order to prevent from being a hit against Matt Olson. So he's already giving up the hard contact, and now he's giving up 2 singles to get the go-ahead run over at first base at this time, because the score at this time was just 2-1. And I think at that point it was good to pull him. The guys, even though those 2 hits themselves, they were hard hit on the ground, and that's why a lot of the hard contact for the Braves today didn't go for base hits, is because most of the hard contact was on the ground. 5 of those were off of the ground, those hard hit pitches. 3 for fly balls, 1 of which was the home run, and then 2 for line drives. But these 2 hits at the end of the start were seeing eye singles, essentially, hit hard but on the ground. Even so, at that point, it seemed like the Braves hitters had adjusted to Zebby Matthews and were putting the ball hard in play a lot more often than not, and it was time to let Zebby Matthews bow out and bring in this new look, shut down bullpen that has been one of the best in Major League Baseball since the trade deadline. So hats off goes to Derek Shelton for making the right decision and understanding that it is better to be early than late. It is especially better to be early than late when you have a guy like Cody Funderburk as your fire extinguisher. He's almost been used as the stopper, at least the guy that is most comfortable to come into the middle of the inning and try and leave runners on base, because he has done that a lot recently. And it is not starting with a clean slate where you can, most relievers are going to go from the stretch anyways, even with no runners on base. But if you really wanted to, you could go and start the inning from the windup. And if you don't let any runners get on base, then you get to go the whole inning from the windup, if that is how you so choose. Cody Funderburk is not coming into those clean innings. He does not have the margin for error because he has the tying run 90 feet away and he has the go-ahead run on first base against a very tough Braves lineup. But much like Zebby Matthews, Cody Funderburk answered the call. And I think there are a lot of folks on Twins Twitter, Twins Reddit, Twins social media in general that owe Cody Funderburk an apology. Because yes, the numbers were not great early on in the year, and perhaps I would have also been pounding the drum for Funderburk to be brought down to AAA or flat out released. But I was candid about this early on in the season to prevent my bias from showing. But the person that measured my room, all my rooms in my house, to replace the carpet after years of wear and tear and dog hair and cat hair, the person that measured those rooms, when he first came to the house, he was wearing a Twins shirt. And I said, "Oh, you're a Twins fan." And he said, "Well, I'm not necessarily a Twins fan. I grew up in Arizona, but my best friend plays for the Twins." And I said, "Oh, who's your best friend?" And he said, "Cody Funderburk." And so I made a decision not to say anything bad about Cody Funderburk because I don't want my carpet being messed up. First of all, if that got to that guy that I'm talking crap about his best friend, maybe I'm getting mismatched patches all throughout in my kid's room, or God forbid, the living room. And then you have to get some nasty-ass rug to cover all of that up. No, not going to talk poorly about Cody Funderburk. So the rug guy prevented me from doing that and prevented me from having now to be in this camp that has to issue Cody Funderburk an apology, because there were a lot of people calling for his job, saying that he was not worth it, bemoaning the fact that he was going to be a key part of the Twins bullpen early on in the season, despite a hot finish to last year. And since coming back from an injury, over the last 2 months, since the start of July, the numbers on Cody Funderburk, I mean, we haven't seen ERA-wise since like Dennis Reyes in 2006, where he was just going up against left-handed hitters and somehow put up a .6 something ERA. For Cody Funderburk, it is even better over the last 2 months. He's pitched 19 1/3 innings, has given up just 1 run. Yes, you heard that right. 1 run over the last 2 months while being used pretty regularly out of the bullpen. That is a .47 earned run average. And he got whiffs on almost all of his pitches tonight. So Cody Funderburk, whatever it has been, whatever voodoo magic Pete Mackey has imbued upon you, or whatever bullpen session that LaTroy Hawkins has worked out, whatever kinks in your game that you had at the beginning of the year, thank you for all that you have done in providing this Twins team a bulldog out of the bullpen from the left-hand side that can come in to an emergency situation and shut it down just like that. Stop all the damage, stop all the bleeding. You are the gauze pad for this Minnesota Twins starting rotation, or even if it's a reliever that he has to come in and bail out. You are that gauze pad. You are that stopper. And not me, but all of Twins Twitter and Twins Reddit owes you an apology. So hopefully you get that en masse in your DMs or social media, whatever, wherever. Emails. People have your address, I guess. I mean, however it is that you want to apologize to Cody Funderburk, feel free to do so. Send it to the P.O. Box of Target Field. I'm going to get off of that tangent and talk about some other of the big, gutty bullpen efforts today, because Andrew Morris also in pitching in his 3rd game in 4 days comes in and shows absolutely no signs of fatigue whatsoever. And I don't know if this was just a thing with the radar gun tonight, because all of the Twins pitchers were pitching with velocity higher than their season average. So either they're all, not dealing with any fatigue in the dog days of August, probably doubtful, or the radar gun is a little bit wonky. Maybe that's the case. But for what it's worth, tonight the fastball for Andrew Morris was averaging over 3 miles per hour, what his fastball typically averages. Andrew Morris was firing that thing at 99 miles per hour instead of the typical 96.5 that it sits at. If he can provide that juice the rest of the way, if that juice is real, again, with that caveat, but if he can provide that juice the rest of the way, man, that bullpen looks deadly. Andrew Morris has been a good pitcher when it's been at 96. He can become an elite reliever if that fastball sits at 99 for the rest of the season and into the postseason. And then we're talking about much different fortunes, perhaps, for this Minnesota Twins team with a bullpen, with Funderburk, with Morris, with Minter, with Hoffman, with Nance, with Yoendris Gomez. It looks pretty good. A rejuvenated, after his 1 day off, rejuvenated Andrew Morris just fires the fastball, cutter, sinker. No breaking balls, all just fastball variations, and gets the job done. Braves hitters were not able to touch him one bit. And we are now reaping the benefits of the trade deadline and reaping the benefits of the Twins' development over the past couple of seasons within their minor league systems to make Andrew Morris this pitcher. And he was a guy that I thought was going to get some serious play as a starting pitcher this year. But when they brought him up and he immediately went into the bullpen and immediately found success there, well, you don't want to mess with a good thing. So maybe Andrew Morris just becomes, the closer of the future. I would certainly be fine with that. That was the career track of Joan Duran. He was a lights-out starter that was moved to the bullpen, albeit for him it was in the minor leagues first before being put in the bullpen at the major league level, where he had now at least had some experience in the minor leagues. Morris has always been a starting pitcher in the minors, and then when he came up with the Twins, was placed right into the bullpen. But that is a similar career arc that Joan Duran took. So maybe Andrew Morris obviously doesn't have quite the stuff that Joan Duran has, but can be that closer of the future. Or maybe our closer of the future is the closer of the present in Yoendris Gomez. Because Yoendris Gomez has just been a revelation. It has probably been the single best move that the Minnesota Twins front office has made this year. That and calling up Andrew Morse. But the best external hire that Jeremy Zoll was able to get. And yes, it was during a time where you were just kind of shotgunning the waiver wire. Whoever was hitting waivers, you were bringing in and giving them essentially a tryout of like 3 appearances. But Yoendris Gomez passed that tryout and has been a lights-out closer. He has not blown a save for your Minnesota Twins. He does have 2 losses when he's been brought into a tie game, but he has not given away a lead yet for your Minnesota Twins. And he now has 18 saves this season. And since he became the full-time closer, because when he first came in, yes, he did close out some games, but that was in that weird time where we, for the first 2 months of the season, were basically going closer by committee, and there were 12 different guys at one point that had saves. Yoendris Gomez took over the closer role end of June, early of July, as the permanent marker Sharpie guy that will come in the 9th inning if you are up by 3 runs or less. And he has had a 2.36 ERA since taking over that taking over the permanent closer role at the end of June, early July. Or end of May, early June. My bad. So, that is another tip of the hat. This time not to Derek Shelton, but to this front office, who I've been critical of for, I think, good reason recently. But Yoendris Gomez was a diamond in the rough, and he has been made into... I mean, if he had been pitching like this from the very beginning of the season, if the Twins had him from the very beginning of the season and he was doing this as the full-time closer, he would certainly have been an all-star. That is the pitcher that the Twins have brought in. And so now you have a ton of all-star capable arms in the bullpen, and it is just a weight off of my back and a weight off of the back of all of us Twins fans, and an unclenching of the buttocks for all of us in the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th innings, because we have a bullpen that we can trust. And probably as soon as I say this tomorrow, they're going to blow a lead or something. But more often than not, I'm going to be confident that these guys can get the job done, which just was not something I could say earlier on in the year. We also couldn't say earlier on in the year, or at least I couldn't, that I had a lot of faith in Josh Bell. He got off to a hot start for like the first week or 2 of the season and then fell into a severe rut. So much so that his batting average was all the way down to like 210. On base percentage wasn't much better, wasn't providing a whole lot of power. But in his last 66 games now, Josh Bell is hitting like the 2019 All-Star Josh Bell. Maybe not with the 37 home runs in a juice ball era, but the numbers are 298, 357, 512 for the batting average, on base, and slugging, putting his OPS number at 869. And that is over the course of 66 games. That is over the course of the majority of this season to this point. Josh Bell, who I and many others had declared as strictly a streaky hitter, who has ups for a long time, downs for a long time. And beginning of the season, it was ups for a very short period and then downs for a long time. Now it is game in, game out consistency. And the ball that he hit today, the hung splitter by Tyler Mahle, got out of the park in a hurry and went all the way up, like I said, this can be like a Falklands thing where both Miguel Sano and Jim Thome would probably stake their own claim on that upper deck section in right center field with all of the balls that each of them hit here during their Twins tenure. But I call it Thome Land because he was the one to christen it that. Not officially, just in my own mind, in my own idea of Twins lore. He hits it into Thome Land. And that's not a place that is easy to go to, and Josh Bell had the power to do that. And typically when Josh Bell hits home runs, it's kind of like a golf swing where it does just clear, kind of like 2009 Joe Mauer, where it might get a couple of rows up, but it was not hit like a tape measure shot. This one was a tape measure shot. They only listed it as 434 feet, but I think we need to start like tracking not the distance that it goes from home plate to where it would have been projected to land, but the distance that its whole parabolic arc has from bat all the way to when it finally lands in a seat, because that might give us a better idea of how much power a player has. Just a thought, just an idea, because 434 feet, while a solid, good number, does not quite do the majestic shot that Josh Bell hit the justice that it so deserves. So Josh Bell has been a cornerstone of this Minnesota Twins lineup. No doubt about it. And it's been a consistent Josh Bell. It has been different than what we have seen from him mostly throughout his career, and that is a prolonged period of success. Probably something we have not seen since that aforementioned 2019 season. And then Ryan Jeffers as the offensive heartbeat of your Minnesota Twins. A couple guys get on in front of him. Well, let's go to the first inning. First inning, opposite field double off of the right center field wall. Eighth inning, opposite field double now with two guys on base in front of him off of the right center field wall. This is not a guy that early on in his career was an all-fields hitter, and certainly not an all-fields with power hitter. If that's a shorter wall, that's a home run for Ryan Jeffers in almost both of those instances, if in some ballparks, I'm sure. I know Baseball Savant has that stat, but I wasn't able to look at it. I didn't think to look at it until I mentioned it just now. But that power that he has, not only pulling the ball, but also taking it the other way, makes him a hitter that becomes so much more difficult. And we talked about it a lot early on in the season, because I started to notice that he was taking a lot of pitches the other way, and he had changed up his approach at the plate. And he is now taking 28% of his batted balls the other way, which doesn't seem like a lot, and even wouldn't seem like a lot of an increase from last year, which was about 25, 26%. And his career average around 23%. But 28% and 26%, the difference in that is being a top 60 player and going the opposite way, and a top 250 player going the opposite way. That 2.5% makes up a big difference. And Ryan Jeffers, by kind of adjusting his swing, being able now to hit to all fields and hit to all fields with power, has limited the weaknesses that he has as a hitter. There are not many places where you can attack Ryan Jeffers where he is not going to be able to put the ball where he wants to put it. He can take it outside pitches. He's not going to pull them on the ground. Outside pitches, he's just going to go with them. Inside pitches, he's going to pull with power. He is a hitter. When you become a hitter that can hit to all fields, it is very much coveted in every single lineup, because that hitter has fewer and fewer weaknesses than a guy that you can just pitch outside a lot of the time. Royce Lewis, for example, and he will more likely than not just pull it on the ground if he swings at it. And now obviously you have to execute all those pitches and not leave anything up over the plate, but there are more weaknesses in those types of pull hitters, pure pull hitters, than there are in a guy that can take it to all fields and elevate it to all fields, like Ryan Jeffers has been able to do this year. I'm not sure what he did in the offseason to change his swing seemingly so drastically, and to change these batted ball event hits to the opposite field so drastically, but whatever it was, continue to do it this offseason. And also, let's get him signed to a contract, please, for the love of God, like a 5-year deal or something. Before the lockout happens, before he has a chance to hit free agency, lock him up. I was a Ryan Jeffers hater all the way up until the start of this 2026 season, but I changed my mind when I saw the differences on opening day. Give this man a deal and let him be the catcher for the next half decade in a lineup that's going to have a lot of different good pieces coming up in the minor leagues. And if we are to believe the word of our Pohlad owner in charge, Tom Pohlad, should also be at least threat to sign some free agents, which is more than we've been able to say over the last couple of years. Your Minnesota Twins just a half game out of the playoff spot right now. They are chasing down the Texas Rangers, who won their game 5-0 Hopefully the Rangers will lose tomorrow, and hopefully your Minnesota Twins can get a victory. They are taking on the Atlanta Braves for the final game of that series. The Twins going for the sweep. It'll be A.J. Smith-Shawver going for the Braves. He's 0-0 with a 4.45 ERA and 4 strikeouts. Meanwhile, it will be Taj Bradley for your Minnesota Twins. The current ace of the staff is 9-5 with a 3.98 ERA and 151 strikeouts, but he is coming off of his worst start of the season against the Phillies in Dyersville, Iowa last week. First pitch for that one is going to be at 1:40 p.m., and we will have all of the recap for you after that game. And that's going to be the last call on the Twins Talk for tonight. Thanks for pulling up a stool and joining in the conversation at the Twinkie Town Tavern. We'll see you back here after the next one. Go Twins!